in our lesson 3 of Why the Sea is Salty. And the name of our lesson today is to compare and contrast points of view. When you guys think about compare and contrast, hopefully that brings to mind the ideas of these Venn diagrams, these two circles that come together. And in one half of the circle, we could compare something like a whale. And on the other half of the circle, we could compare something such as a fish. And what we would do is we would then talk about the differences between those two. So for instance, on the screen here, I have a Venn diagram. The red side is the whales, the blue side is the fish, and that middle section would be the purple section, of course. And it's the things that those items have in common. So on the red side, you have whales have hair, they have a live birth, and they breathe air through their blowholes. Fish lay eggs. They don't have live births. They have scales, and they breathe through water. Now, both of them live in the water, both have fins, and both can swim. This is a really simple thing that we do sometimes is we compare two things. We do this when we go shopping. We compare the price of 1 gallon of milk to another type of milk. We compare this video game to that video game. We are creatures that like to compare. So fourth graders, you do this in your everyday life. Now, when we talk about point of view, that's a little bit different. Point of view is almost like an opinion. But when we're reading our books, we're not coming up with opinions about our characters. I mean, we do that sometimes, but more than likely, what point of view is asking when we're reading is what point of view is the story being told from? And the 2 points of view that I really want you to pay close attention to today is that section in pink, okay? First person. That is the story told by one of the characters in the story, and often it will refer to them, the narrator in the story is going to refer to themselves as I. So if I'm sitting here in front of you today and I start to tell you a story about how I went to the grocery store, I ran down the aisle, I found the milk, I dropped the eggs, I ran my cart into another shopper. This is a terrible story, but as I'm telling it, you know that I am the person in the story and I am telling you that story. I cannot tell you what the other shopper was thinking when I ran their cart or my cart into them. I cannot tell you what the manager of the store thought as I ran past them through the door. But if the story was told from a third person point of view, which is that orange section over there, that's the story being told by a narrator who is not a character in the story. So for instance, this person or this character could be watching me in the store. So pretend that you're floating above me in the store mire as I walk through it. So Mrs. Green ran through the door past the manager, who gave her an angry look. She then fled down the aisle towards the milk. But in the process, she ran her cart into the shopper, Melissa. Melissa was frustrated with Mrs. Green. She gave her a dirty glare. Do you see how now you guys aren't hearing from me, but you're hearing from somebody else? And you also will notice that the narrator might refer to the characters by name. So when I was talking in the third person point of view, I referred to myself as Mrs. Green. And then they also referred to the manager in the story, and they referred to Melissa, the shopper that I hit in the story. So you can hear just by me telling you a story how this might be different depending on who's talking. So today, what I'm going to do is show you a little bit about how this might look in a story, how this might look in a text. So we're going to continue with our story, Why the Sea is Salty. And like a good reader, I'm going to reread the page we left off the other day, okay? Because good readers go back and read the page they left off on the day before so that it helps their brains adjust and remember the things that they were reading before they stopped. Today, I'm going to point out 2 spots to you where you can kind of see the narrator talking in this story. And then we're going to think about how this might look differently if the author had chosen another point of view to write the story in. So we're going to use dialogue and description to compare and contrast points of view and why the sea is salty. And in this lesson, we're going to compare and contrast points of view, including the point of view from which the story is narrated and from the point of view in which it could be narrated. All right? Why the sea is salty. When his eyes got used to the dim light, he could make out the great piles of salt his father had told him about. The smell was so awful he could hardly breathe. Fill your baskets like this, said his father, crouching down at the bottom of one of the piles of salt. Make sure you don't cause a salt slide, though. The boy scooped up some salt with his bare hands and dropped it into the basket. He looked up at the pile of salt towering over him. I hope it doesn't slide down on top of me, he thought nervously. I'd be buried alive. Quickly, the boy crouched down and used his hands to scoop the salt like his father had shown him. He scooped and he scooped until both bamboo baskets were full. Then the boy and his father picked the baskets up and balanced them on their heads and left the cave. The boy stood tall so he didn't spill any of his salt as they went back down the slippery path. But then he couldn't see where he was putting his feet. Several times they got tangled in vines, and he stumbled. By the time he got back to the shore, his body was sore from carrying the heavy load. Chapter 5. A good idea. The boy put his basket of salt in his father's small boat. He looked up to see the giant stepping over the hills. The boy marveled at how easy it was for the huge man. He wished he had long legs like him. Let's pause right there for just a second, fourth graders. Look right there at that very beginning. Hopefully you can see my mouse circling around it. Let's reread that. What point of view is this told from? The boy put his basket of salt in his father's small boat. He looked up to see the giant stepping over the hills. The boy marveled at how easy it was for the huge man. He wished he had long legs like him. So if I pause here and think, I noticed that he used words like the boy, his. He referred to his father's small boat, but he never used the word I. This kind of tells me that this story might be written in the third person point of view. And if I go back to my prior slides, that third person point of view is told by the narrator, who is not a character in the story, because we're hearing a little bit from that character, but we're not hearing exactly his internal thoughts. Long legs would be good for winning races and crossing mountains, he thought. Suddenly, he had an idea. He turned to the villagers who were picking up baskets into their boats. Why don't we make a bridge between the giant's island and our island, he said excitedly. Then you could get salt of all kinds of weather, and I would never get seasick again. No one can make a bridge that long, laughed the villagers. I can, said the boy, looking at the giant who was now standing on the shore. The villagers laughed even louder. The boy says he can build a bridge from here to there, they said, pointing across the sea. What a dreamer he is. The boy's father did not like the way they laughed at his son. It was good to have dreams, but how would you make a bridge? He asked gently. With the giant's legs, answered the boy. He walked over to the giant and stood beside him. He held up his hand as if he was measuring how long his legs were. Please, giant, he called, can you help me make a bridge? The giant was puzzled. He didn't understand. Sitting down on the sand, the giant pulled his legs up to his chest and wrapped his arms around his legs to hold himself together. How would a big giant like me be able to help a small boy like you? He asked. Like this. The boy quickly made 2 piles of sand on the shore. This is your island, he explained, and this is mine. He then sat on the piles of sand and stretched his legs over the other. See, if you stretch out your legs, then they would reach from your island to my island. Then the people would come more often and get their salt. The giant liked this idea of people coming more often to his island, and a big smile spread across his face. They would bring food, and he would have more to eat. Tell me what to do, he said eagerly. Well, the boy said, as soon as we have used up the salt we have in our baskets, we'll light a fire. The smoke will be a sign for you that we are ready. The giant listened carefully as the boy explained how they could make a bridge. The boy's father waited patiently in his boat. He was glad the giant was interested in his son's idea. The other villagers were strangely silent as they got ready to sail home. Perhaps the boy was onto something with his bridge idea, they thought. They wished they hadn't laughed